unless you like aim for like the politicians, you know what car they're driving and you just stand in front of it. Just stand in front of it. I don't want to say anything else.
You're listening to The Big Drill.
And welcome to The Big Drill.
Welcome everyone.
Welcome. Hi Charlie.
Hi.
We've got ourselves another guest.
Yeah.
Second one.
Second
Our
guest.
second guest ever.
I find you slightly intimidating right now. I won't lie.
Why do you find this intimidating?
I don't know. I think it's the expectations that you're putting on me.
No expectations.
I can feel the weight of the expectation.
Don't be a dick.
Being the last of the series and all that.
It is, isn't it? Last of the series.
The final season 1.
So what are we going to be discussing today?
Oh well, we're going to be talking about protests, Extinction Rebellion.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you said that. I've got a problem with the word extinction.
Why?
I can't say it very well.
Oh, I thought you meant the actual.
Well, I've got a problem with extinction as well.
Fair enough. We might briefly touch on other protests around the world, Lebanon and Hong Kong probably mainly. Chile as well. But Charlie, as I know, Will has told me you were involved in an Extinction Rebellion protest.
I mean, that's putting it a bit too far, I think, for me.
Okay,
but yeah,
you explain it.
So I'll explain it. So I basically went to an Extinction Rebellion protest.
Why?
I think I was just, I was curious to know about it. Also, I support the principle of it. I think I just supported the principle of it. So I thought if I went down and added my body to the numbers of people that were there, then that would help.
Okay, for the people who are listening and don't know, what is the principle of Extinction Rebellion?
The principle of the Extinction Rebellion is that basically we're in a period of man-made extinction. So the sixth mass extinction. So the previous ones have been like the Ice Age and stuff like that, or the meteor that killed the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And that's because if you look at the science and you look at the rate of extinction in animal species, you've got exactly that. You've got I think it's like 1,000% or something ridiculous extinction of species at the moment, and it's probably because the world that we live in now and society we live in now is putting too much pressure on the resources that this world can offer us, and human beings are taking more than the earth can give right now. So at the end of the day, I went down there, 1 out of curiosity, 2 out of support, but 3 out of I'd never really been to a proper protest before. I looked at the stuff in the Iraq War and thought, that's going to make fuck all difference.
Did you take any super glue down with you?
What, to glue myself to something?
Just out of interest. Did you go loaded with any kind?
No,
of
I mean, one thing. I don't know how much you want to get into it. What I would say is that when I went down there, just being a body, which I'm sure any proper Extinction Rebellion person would say, we need as much support as we can get. I did feel like a bit of a third wheel, just sort of hanging around there, just being like holding my little placard, being like,
I live my life as a third wheel, mate. It's fine.
Yeah. So what I did in the end was I figured out that I could add value by doing a video of it, because one of the things I think is that the way that the media portrayed Extinction Rebellion, and in some cases for good reason, because they just described them as kind of hemp-wearing extremist hippies. I thought, well, if I do a little video and show people around the camp and show people how it operates, maybe that will reduce some of the perception of that. So I did a little video basically just saying, like, this is what it's like, this is how the camp runs, and these are the kind of people that you get here, and this is kind of the police presence in that in Trafalgar Square where I was, and it seemed to help. People seemed to kind of connect with that, and a few people said, you know what, you've kind of given me the impetus to actually go down and sort of support, because I think a lot of people believe in climate change and want to do something about it, but I think the problem with the Extinction Rebellion is that it's creating a perception that it's an extremist position.
But I mean, I've got one question. Firstly, I'll come on to the extremist bit. I just want to pin that up there on the imaginary wall. So,
or the real wall.
or the real
the
wall,
actual
not that,
wall, yeah.
the rented accommodation. I can probably come back on that. So you went down, you had a look at the police presence, and obviously you noticed that they were there. Now, I'm fully aware that there was this like sweep of arrests that were made, and then they actually went through the High Court and they got deemed as unlawful arrests, and they got revoked and so on and so forth. Now, I was very curious as to wonder what the actual minute by minute, day by day. Obviously, I know you were only there for a period of time, but what was the actual feel of the relationship between, or the kind of tension? Was there any between the police and the protesters?
It was very, very interesting, and that actually was one of the main things I took away from that, which is that I'm a massive supporter of the police, and I think in the same way that nurses and doctors for our NHS are miracle workers, police do the same every day.
Absolutely.
So absolute respect for them. But there was a sense where if you're on the other side of that and you're in a what you deem a peaceful protest, where sure they're blocking a road, but there's no it's they're not being violent, they're not breaking stuff, they're not really causing any damage or issues like that. To see the way that the police operate as a machine is quite unnerving. So I was walking away from the protest when I'd basically had enough of just standing around like a third wheel. Yeah. And there was
spare prick at a wedding.
Yeah, it's like in Star Wars where the stormtroopers line up in those columns and they march around like that. Yeah. Police did exactly the same.
I'm just going to have to stop you there.
Go on.
I know who they are. That's fine. I know who.
Doesn't know who
I'm talking about.
I do. The guys in white. There you go.
They got the guns.
And they miss every shot they shoot.
Yes. Every shot.
Every single shot.
So you felt like it was like, as you were walking away, you look over to the right and you feel like dun, dun, dun,
yeah.
Dun, that like kind
well,
of.
it's the military precision of it. They'd line up in their little rows and then they'd all swarm a particular part of the camp, and then they basically pick everyone up and clear everyone off.
Right.
And then the protesters would kind of, find another part which they could kind of jump into, and then they'd be there for a bit, and then they
would come again. Them around.
Not so much. It was just it was marginal gains basically. It's very kind of pointless really. They could have just left them to it, but the police were. I know that they got criticism for how they handled it last time, being too soft.
Right.
But then they felt. They felt. I guess it was just interesting to have quite a strong positive view of the police, and then to see it from the other side, where actually you guys are just being.
Yeah.
Dicks, just let them protest. They're protesting for a good reason.
Yeah, but I mean, let's be honest. They're only
following orders,
exactly,
right? Yeah.
So I mean, at the end of the day, what can actually one do?
Right. So but you follow that to the extreme, where you have, I'm not saying the police are Nazis, but take it to the extreme, right? So you're just an ordinary guy, a right wing party comes into power, but you work in the police, and they're like, right, we need you to arrest all these people because they're Jewish, and you go, sure, I'm just following orders.
Yeah, well, in war, basically, you're told to go down into that city, and you're told that after it's been shelled, you're told to go down there and you clear out any potential threats for it to be.
Yeah.
So you follow orders. Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting.
That's a.
The feds are coming. No, because they've heard.
They know that I said that, right? Yeah. I'm sorry, I take it back.
Can I ask something? So, these protests, what is the end goal for them being there and causing trouble? Because I have a slight problem with how they're operating it.
Yeah, sure.
And I will explain why after your answer.
But yeah.
What are they trying to achieve?
They've got a very clear. I think it's four key things, but the kind of number one thing is they just want government action on climate change, which is much more I guess you could call it aggressive than what they're doing now. I think the main issue at the moment is that they and I in some respects see the kind of menial slow development of renewables and all that kind of stuff as not really going to when the scientists are saying we need to limit the global warming to under 2 degrees or 1.5 degrees Celsius, and we're heading towards that in the next 5 years, and we're still basically commissioning coal-fired power plants and building a new runway at Heathrow. Like, there seems to be a mismatch between
what's being asked and what's
being
actually
asked
done.
by scientists, that we're all basically screwed if we don't change, and what government are doing.
Sure.
So that's really what it's about. It's about saying, guys, we need to do something now, otherwise we're
You're not doing
screwed.
enough, and you're not doing it soon enough.
Yeah, and actually the problem with it is that the majority of the population, in my opinion, because they're just normal people getting on with their lives, it's not going to be a priority for them, and they're only going to care about it when it's too late. So it's going to take some serious balls, basically, from someone to go, right, we need to actually do something about this, because otherwise we're in trouble.
So the thing, I've seen some footage online, and the one that stuck out to me was there was these two people on the underground,
The train,
on the train.
There's a DLR. That was on the DLR.
No, it was a train.
It was a train. It was a Southwest train. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right.
Was that what
It was on the DLR as well.
Oh, I'm sure it was, and
A couple of trains.
I just couldn't understand the objective behind those. And I'm not saying they represent everyone that was protesting, but I just can't understand how you think angering the public is going to get them on your side. It doesn't.
No.
It doesn't. If your objective is to convince the government, why would you anger the people? They're the only way it's going to work.
Yeah.
You got to kind of keep them on your side. So what are your views on when people do stuff like that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I know the thing you're talking about. I guess that particular incident is a great example of the way these organisations work, which is that you have, I guess you could call them extreme elements, and you don't have. They're essentially a community where they build groups around the country, and some groups will do things that the central mind can't control. I guess it's the nature of all change initiatives, in the sense that you have people that are at the extreme level. It's a normal distribution curve, right? You have people who are extreme. You have your outliers, you have your middle ground, and you have your detractors or your conservatives.
Well, look at the Black Civil Rights Movement. Look at the Indian.
Malcolm X, for example, was an extreme.
Didn't have anything to do with Martin Luther King. Still, like, we're going for this, and the Panthers and the Indian nationalists that went around bombing New Delhi and stuff like that, through when they were fighting for their independence.
Yeah.
There wasn't, Gandhi followed a very peaceful and a very that there's elements of disturbance and kind of disorientation of the system, so to speak, but not in an aggressive way, but to create change and to force some sort of magnitude of change. Whereas from that central mind, you had the guys that were the extremists that were effectively protesting in a violent and aggressive way. I'll ask the question now: is that unavoidable? That within a huge spectrum of kind of group or movement, you're always going to get those which have a different outlook, frustrations, or have a different way in which their brain works, in which aggression and violence is their way of communicating and protesting, and especially if it's after a so long period of time where they're not getting any kind of magnitude of change that they're looking for.
Yeah, it's born out of frustration, I guess. I guess come back to your earlier question about the train thing. I remember when I was at school watching was it Montgomery in one part of the US during the civil rights movement, where they were basically, dogs were attacking black people and they were using water cannons and things like that on the streets because there were protests. That would have pissed off the average Montgomery resident, because as far as they're concerned, the black people should shut up and do what they're told, kind of thing. So actually pissing off the public isn't or pissing off certain parts of the public isn't necessarily a bad thing.
I think it's unavoidable.
And it's probably unavoidable. I think over time the middle ground tends to win out because it tends to be a bigger part of the population. But that in today's, in this day and age, the loudest segments of the normal distribution curve tend to be the most extreme. So they're the ones that you hear,
and they're also sensationalized through social media.
And then they're shouting at people in a bubble as well. Like you get the extremists on both sides, both conservatives and kind of more progressive people. Let's call them vegans.
Oh my god!
Oh wow! I said the V word.
Oh wow!
No, I'm joking. No, let's call them. Let's call them Extinction Rebellion for the sake of this particular episode. But in a group of people that all but believe and ascribe to the same views that they have. They put out stuff and they see stuff, and the algorithms work so that they work and are continually fed this idea. And then you get these two very polarised views, which is basically what's happened. Fuck it, I'm talking about Brexit, but it's basically what's happened here. And this is the issue with the way that those kind of channels basically feed people information. But your question was what? I've forgotten.
Was it a question? I'm not sure.
He was saying, is it inevitable for violence to occur?
Looking through history, the history of protests, and you can always look. So, I was doing some research. I love a bit of research, me. So I was doing a bit of research on it, and going through. You can look at the 10 most peaceful protests of the history of mankind or modern history, whatever. And as you're going through them, you're like, well, yeah, that was peaceful. That was a peaceful part of a much bigger movement, which had very aggressive and even say for example the communism, when communism ended, the Berlin Wall came down, and that was obviously a fantastic thing. It allowed for growth and kind of recoupling of nations and people within the nations. Fantastic, absolutely. But that was probably the most. I was talking to actually one of my clients, and he said that was probably the least aggressive one, in the sense whereby there was 2/3 of the whole of the communist movement that was currently under that communist umbrella. 2/3 of the whole of those people wanted it to change, so that they didn't really have much choice, because if they had then decided, oh, do you know what, fuck it, we're going to overthrow you anyway, they wouldn't have been able to stop it because of the sheer volume of people. So even though there wasn't that direct actual actionable violence, there was still that overarching threat of, there's a shitload of people here, we do not have the infrastructure to stop them, so there's still that kind of.
But that's suggesting that
if they pulled the lever,
change is only possible because there's an underlying threat of violence. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, so I want to bring up Lebanon into this. So they've been protesting in great unity, might I add, against the government, and I think they should be used as an example on how other countries should be doing it. It's been as peaceful as it can be, yet still there was still a death of someone who was shot by a soldier in the head in front of his wife and child. Even though up until then there'd been no problems, everyone's just peacefully protesting, in the end it still results in some set of violence. And I think they actually dealt with that very well. I could have imagined that happening, the country erupting and going, you know what, you're gonna kill one of us, we're just gonna go. But no, they produced a funeral for him, and they've gone back, and it's getting a lot more tense now.
Yeah, and this is my point.
And it's almost, it might reach boiling point.
One more incident like that, and that will be the spark that ignites.
Oh, I would have thought that first death would have been.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now contrast that to Hong Kong, which has been.
Oh, I've seen some horrible things
for 5 months or whatever.
Horrible things.
But this comes back to the thing about the police presence and responsibility, and how they're perceived as a force within this narrative, which is that as much as you could argue that the Hong Kong police are doing their job according to what they're told to do, the perception of what they're doing, and actually you're right, you see them doing all sorts of horrible things, from a protester's perspective, is always that they represent the authority, and that authority is what they're fighting. So actually, it builds tension. Your original question was, do I think that it's always going to end in violence? I think there's always that potential,
which therefore is, it's like, it's not the same, but let's say, for example, domestic abuse, right? You can still be in a position where you're being domestically abused without actually the act of violence occurring. It could be psychological, mental, the threat of the violence, which actually is the abuse, right?
Yeah.
So
sure.
Let's switch it, and then you're looking at this situation where you've got, I don't know, 100, let's say like 100,000 people, then that kind of, it grows to 1 million, 1 million grows to 3 million, now you've got 5 million. If someone who was like leading that kind of pocket of a movement decided to pull the lever and start to incite violence, a few sergeants and generals within like the kind of cohort of people, if they chose to do that, then all of a sudden you've got yourself a problem. So what then happens is that person who can pull that lever gets himself leverage to meet at the table with the authority and go, well, without necessarily saying it, you could be in up shit creek without a paddle if I do that. So that's my kind of point. It's just like, there's still that aggression or threat of violence, even if it's not acted out, is still, I believe, a component of overarching a system, or going against the system, which is actually quite happy going along as it is. Why would you change it?
I've had a great visualization of how we can do this.
Okay.
So you walk into a room.
Brace yourself.
You walk into a room, and there's a gorilla minding his own business, eating his bananas. You are still going to be as cautious as ever.
100%.
Tiptoeing around this gorilla, because at any moment in time, he could just decide to destroy you.
Or like baboons, for example.
Or baboons.
Or Goku.
That's basically what you're saying. There's a chance the gorilla is going to switch on.
Yeah.
But whilst the gorilla's small and a baby gorilla, not so much of a problem. But as soon as it grows and becomes bigger and becomes a formidable force, now you're going to tiptoe. Back when it was little, you just walk straight past it and go, oh.
I think tiptoe is a wrong word, though. I think you're talking about awareness, probably, more than anything else. Okay. Like being aware of that possibility is obviously whenever you're pushing the boundaries in anything that implies in business, it implies in creativity or protesting. If you're pushing the boundaries, there's always the threat that it can spill over into an out-and-out conflict. If you're trying to change the system or you're going against the status quo, it's an uncomfortable experience for both the person trying to push the change and the person receiving it. So
especially if the person receiving it is in a position where they're actually quite happy.
Well, they're actually naturally pushing back against it. Yeah. So but that's where you need to find a compromise, and I would say it's a positive thing that in the majority of cases, even in the case that you describe, Ghazi, that people are self-controlled enough and civilized enough to go, okay, obviously that guy was probably a psychopath and shot this poor innocent person, and rather than let this turn into a bloodbath, let's take a breath and realize what we're fighting for here, and that it's not going to be achieved with violence. Because if I think the next stage on from that is, if you do go into an out-and-out war, you've got a civil war. Yeah. People die, people suffer, it's horrible, and no one wants it, not even the government. So.
I actually think that's why Lebanon has refrained, because they have suffered from that already, from the civil war. So they're thinking, we don't want to go back to that stage. Maybe the younger ones don't know, but they've probably heard from their elders.
So I've got some facts, guys, because I love a bit of research. Have I already mentioned that?
Yeah. It's because we didn't do loads of research.
It's because no guests have any research, and Ghazi just does a bit of research on the bus sometimes on the way over. So I take the brunt of it.
I did my research while I was waiting for Ghazi on the bus.
It weighs heavy on my shoulders.
I got a degree in the time I was waiting for Ghazi on the bus.
There's a lot of traffic.
Friday night traffic. So peaceful versus non-peaceful protest. Okay, so positive solution. It reminds people that even when governed by an oppressive regime, not saying we're in an oppressive regime, but Lebanon...
I think every regime is oppressive to some degree.
Yeah, I'd agree with
that peaceful protest, the power still lies with the people. So it kind of allows that kind of decision making and power. It does.
And one point I'll make on that was that when they banned the protests, Extinction Rebellion protests in London, that was a moment when I was like, wow.
This is getting out of hand.
They're actually telling people they can't protest.
Yeah.
That is a big deal.
That was a big deal for me.
And that's why I think it got overturned, because obviously that's removing and becoming overstepping the line of oppression. Really, it's becoming ridiculous.
I mean, it actually energised them more.
Yeah, of course. More common, on average, peaceful protests attract about 11 times more public participation than armed or violent protests. So you're going to get a huge amount more people. Obviously, people are kind of more happy to go along and protest rather than pick up
a brick,
a brick or a temporary bus stop sign or something like that.
Yeah, which is obviously you can carry two of those in one each hand. That's pretty sick as a weapon.
So many activists link their methods. So from an inspiration point of view, if you're going out and you're protesting, many of people link their protesting to the likes of Dr. Martin Luther King and Gandhi. And that is a very invigorating thing. It's very inspirational to those people to feel like they're connected, doing something which someone great has done before them in a peaceful way. So it's high levels of inspiration. From a success rate point of view, from the 1900s, beginning of the 1900s to 2015, non-violent campaigns have succeeded 51% of the time, which isn't really bad.
That's a decent number.
It's not
I'll
bad.
take those odds.
But when you think about that, violent campaigns only succeed 27% of the time, and I think that's probably to do to what we were discussing earlier about pissing the public off. If you piss the public off with a violent campaign, a disruptive campaign, when it comes to being moving through legislations and stuff like that, if the overall kind of people don't get on board with it, then the government are like, well, the majority of people don't want it anyway because they've just kind of alienated.
They can sit back. Yeah. They can sit back and just watch it.
What I'd be curious about is to know how many of those violent and non-violent campaigns were concurrent, because one of my theories is that if you have I don't know why I keep talking about this bloody normal curve of normal distribution, but one of the things that
odd child.
One of the things I think maybe that Extinction Rebellion are doing is shifting public perception to the point that the extremeness of what I'm using inverted commas because I don't think they're extreme, but
for those on listening on audio, Charlie
I just did the
inverted commas.
Their extremeness is maybe pushing public opinion towards their view,
right?
In a way, but it's not something that maybe they adopt. So what I'm wondering is, does a violent protest at the same time as a non-violent protest anchor the non-violent protest as more acceptable? So is there a point? So for example,
I see what you mean. So it shifts.
See what I mean?
So it's like, well, at least they're not being violent.
So if I started a violent protest for climate to stop climate change, started bombing stuff, would I'm not allowed to say that, am I?
Well,
yeah.
You probably just lost a load of YouTube algorithm points, but
yeah,
don't worry about
sorry
it.
guys.
You've done it now.
Would that then cause the government to be like, oh, okay, we need to stop this. Let's have a conversation with the non-violent protesters and broker a deal. So what that data does is tell me that violent protest doesn't often succeed, but is there something to be said for them running together as a way to shift public opinion towards the less violent?
So
maybe
that's possible, but a shocking fact, and I'll put the link for this particular site, which has kind of pieced together some interesting facts. Although peaceful protests have become more common, their success rates have declined drastically since 2000. So the success of peaceful protesting doesn't carry the same amount of change as it did before.
I think I know why.
Okay, Ghazi. Is this another Ghazi theory?
Hit us with the insight.
I think I know why.
Is it a theory?
Just like with anything, okay? The more you experience, the better you get at it. As governments...
I'd like to think so.
Yeah, thank you. As governments start to experience peaceful protests more and more, they start having tactics to basically get rid of them without them actually getting what they wanted.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's going on. They kind of go, all right, we'll just let them wait for a few days. We'll let them protest. If they don't go away, okay, we'll do this or we'll do that, and then eventually they'll give up.
Well, the time it takes for change to happen, from a peaceful protest point of view, is a hell of a lot longer than violent protesting. So, from a social and political point, the movement that's trying to be generated from peaceful protesting takes a shitload longer. So you basically got to get ready to bed in. And when you think about climate change, we're looking at this is not going to be solved in our generation. If it gets
so
solved.
pessimistic.
I don't think it will. This is down to the next generation. My nieces are 15 and 11.
I think you're wrong, mate. I think it's our choice. I think we have to do it. But anyway, that's depends on how much you believe the science. I mean, Venice is underwater now.
Is it?
Have you not watched that?
Why are you looking at me like I should have
Because it's on the news, and it's basically the whole of Venice has been flooded. It's underwater.
Oh, actually, I've read
noticed that.
So
for me, the assumption that we've got more time than we have is a one of the killer problems. But anyway, So yeah, I think I agree with you, Ghazi. I think it is a case of tactics and governments basically becoming more competent at dealing with peaceful protests. But ultimately, it's about a struggle between people who have the power and control and people who don't. So, and one way they do that is through this idea of democracy, which is that it gives everyone a vote and they all vote, but ultimately they're being manipulated by the media and by Cambridge Analytics and social media and all this kind of stuff. So I think protest is one of the few, it's one of the few actual democratic rights that we still have, I think.
I'm going to throw a curveball now.
Go on.
Okay, here we go.
So I've spoken to Will about this. We mentioned it in a previous podcast where we said necessity is the mother of invention. Do you think we have to stop what we're doing to save the planet, or do you think at some point some genius out there is going to go, wait a minute, we can deal with this by doing it?
I do remember this.
By doing it in a different way.
Yeah.
Did you listen to this podcast we've done?
No, sorry, mate.
That's okay.
That's right, we'll let you off.
I listened to a lot of them.
So do you think there's going to be a technology that comes around where it will save the planet without having to really change?
I think it depends. I think it's
for me. Think there's
we're now talking about climate change, which isn't protesting, but we can talk about it. So my short answer is it depends what you mean by save the planet. So I reckon human beings could operate at a very functional way as a species alone on the planet. They could grow meat in factories. They could, they could clean rivers of plastic and all this kind of stuff using technology. We could even power ourselves using coal. If they managed to solve cold fusion or cold fission or whatever it's called, then we could even power ourselves for free using seawater. Ultimately, it comes down to how much you think the biodiversity that we have on this planet is worth saving. And for me, it's one of the reasons why the world is a great place to live in at the moment. But I understand that people who live in cities, in particular, I'm from a country, I guess. I have a slightly different view, maybe, that I'm quite passionate about the natural world, and I get a lot of pleasure from other animal species, and so I think that we could live on this planet on our own using technology, but it would be a very
bleak.
Well, not. It would be a bleak place, but I guess we would manufacture animals in artificial
synthesized, very synthesized, and like
we'd probably grow them in labs or something. I don't know, but
probably have like a dog, an artificial intelligence dog that will
robot dogs already
shit
exist
on the carpet from day one.
Yeah.
You won't even have to train
artificial grass.
You're making it sound like a good thing now, having non-biological.
Well, that's the question. Maybe that's another podcast. Is the natural world worth saving? Does it add value?
Yeah, no, I like that. I do. That you could go right down the rabbit hole there, can you?
Yeah.
Providing that rabbits still existed, obviously.
Well, there'd be a robot rabbit.
Robot rabbit.
Well, I mean, I think I appreciate obviously, bringing it back obviously to the protesting side of things. I appreciate how it is your right and should always be someone's right to protest. I don't think it should be the right to, kind of like hurt another human being or cause pain to another human being. Of course, that's
So what would you describe as that? Because that's a good point. So like flying drones over Heathrow and causing everyone to have to cancel their holiday.
That's very hurtful for some people that have planned a holiday for their. It's one of their holidays they'd had planned for over a year, 2 years. It could be one of their lifetime holidays, and they missed the flight, and it's not covered on the insurance.
So how about I don't know? Yeah, so blocking a road so that somebody, a million cars pass that day, but maybe one of those cars has a son who's driving to the hospital to save his father,
life-saving treatment
or something. That's hurt, right?
So
the question that I have for you is, what would be acceptable?
We're getting asked the question now.
Does it work like this?
Yeah.
I mean,
what would be acceptable for you? What would be an acceptable level of protest that doesn't hurt somebody or cause any disruption, or and how would that be effective?
I'll let Will answer first.
I mean, that's deep. Can I? Okay, so I think you've got to gauge what the intent is. Okay, so did that person intend for that death to happen or that hurt to happen? So if obviously you've blocked off a road, which is a really busy road, which creates X amount of pollution per year, blah blah, and you've blocked that road, I think that you should obviously give people plenty of notice or whatever, or it shouldn't just be there bang in the morning. But I think if you then go to use a drone and you are disrupting people's lives, then again that.
But isn't there there's nothing more important to an individual than seeing his dad pass away in a hospital and holding his hand? So how does that compare to somebody being able to fly to Benidorm?
I don't think they're comparable. I think the two incidents are particularly comparable.
But those are two actual examples of people that have been upset about Extinction Rebellion, protesting.
So
what's your
the intent when you fly a drone is to disrupt people's holidays. They know that they're not going to be able to fly their planes from safety.
No, it's not. Surely the intent is to stop planes flying. The fact that they fly people to Benidorm for their holidays doesn't, it's not their intent, is it?
It's to stop the planes flying. So it's to cause disruption.
So to stop traffic going is the same thing, surely.
But to go to someone's... Well, but they're not intent. They don't know that person needs to get to that place. But
so you're saying the fact that they know that there's going to be
people flying on holiday.
Oh no, I'm gonna call bullshit on that, because someone could be flying to go visit their dying mother.
Okay, yeah. Well,
let's use an exact example of the two, right? So they disrupt a road, and someone can't get to their father's bedside before they die.
Right.
They disrupt a plane so that somebody can't get to their father's bedside before they die. Okay. Right. So exactly the same scenario, just different transport mechanisms. You're saying that the plane is not okay, but the car is okay?
Because we were talking about people going on holiday. It's different from people dying. So, but if that person is now going to visit someone who's dying...
Okay, so what about this fleet of caravans going down to fucking Cornwall?
Cornwall?
Well, people like caravanning in Cornwall.
They do.
Okay, carry on. So you're going to explain to me how one's different to the other, or how one's acceptable.
If the intent is there to cause disruption, then there's obviously it's malicious. But if that person isn't maliciously going, well, you know, that you can't. I was aiming to disrupt that person so they couldn't get to their bedside of their dying relative. Then that essentially, if there's no intention held, then
but if you're somebody who's listed out your intentions to say that our number one intention is government action on climate change, that's their intention.
Right.
They think that to get them to do that,
For
that
the greater
disrupt.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, if you like Harry Potter, that's a little shout out to the Harry Potter fans. That's a way to get the government to pay attention to what they're doing. So it's like, is it worth that person's upset for the greater good of like having change? Well, I'm asking you.
Well, is that change? I mean, that's a tough question. I know. So if I was in a situation where I wanted to get to my dying relative's bedside and I couldn't get through because of the Extinction Rebellion, I would be pretty pissed off. But then on the flip side of it, if I'm a member of the Extinction Rebellion, I'm trying to make a change. So my emotives and my point is not to cause harm to that person, but is number one priority to create change for the environment. So is it right? Is it wrong? I mean, both people have the right to be doing what they're doing. It's just it's a clash of.
Well, this is why it's a good podcast, because obviously there's no clear right or wrong. That's why it's a discussion.
So
where do I sit? Where do you sit?
Let me give my answer.
Yeah.
Let me swerve this like any good silver-tongued politician would.
My answer would be, before you can start disrupting like that on either side, your main objective as a protesting organisation is to get the people on your side. That should be. I'm teaching you guys now, all of you out there that want to protest. Your first objective must be get the people on your side. Flying a drone over Heathrow is not going to do that.
No.
Disrupting roads, probably not as bad in terms of getting people on your side, but it's still not going to be effective. Get the people on your side, and then the disruptions will be understood by the people.
Educate first.
And at the end of the day, to protest like that, you're going to have to upset individuals.
I think
it's inevitable.
I think it's inevitable.
Yeah, you're going to have to. Unless you aim for the politicians. You know what car they're driving, and you just stand in front of it. Just stand in front of it. I'm not going to say anything else. Just stand in front of it so they can't go to work.
We literally will have an effect.
So there is an argument to say that the guys on the train and the drones and all that kind of stuff is the violent extreme of Extinction Rebellion, because the majority are disruptive in a very peaceful way. They stand in Trafalgar Square, but what are they doing otherwise? Frankly, doing yoga and reading books and
enjoying
playing
life.
bands and not enjoying life because it's grim. I went down there. One of my mates, Ash, has been there for 8 days or something on his own.
Oh, without going home?
Yeah, without going home, just camped there and.
Where do you go to the toilet?
There's a toilet actually there in Trafalgar
okay.
Square, but they have other thing that surprised me about it. Well, not surprised me, but what I liked about it was how everyone was kind of mucking in. So there was little tents where people were cooking, and there were little tents where people were washing up, and there were little tents where there were people speaking. And
now imagine that on a national scale where everyone's on your side.
Yeah,
you would have that just scaled bigger, so everyone's going to be. I'm telling you guys, that's how you do it.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing. Am I disagreeing because I think it's too hard?
It's very difficult.
I think as you say, it comes down to education. I think actually, if you speak to, I don't have kids myself, but I think if you speak to kids, from speaking to people who do have kids, the kids are absolutely terrified about climate change because they're taught about it in school, and they're like, wow, we're going to die if we don't sort this out. Whereas the people actually making the decisions,
Dinosaurs.
The boomers, the okay boomers. They're for them, they think we're being, you know, I say we. They think that we're being sensationalist, essentially. So I regularly get texts from my mother-in-law sending me articles about Extinction Rebellion, how much, you know, she basically disagrees with it because they're disruptive for the reasons we've discussed.
Yeah.
But
that reflects earlier when we mentioned about the fact that how much time do we really have? Well, we don't really know because we've never actually been in this situation before. So protesting is a good way to like get some sort of movement, get some sort of traction, build awareness. You know, and I know that my nieces, especially my 11-year-old niece, she's really clued up. You know, I have eco bricks where bottles where you put the plastic in that can't be recycled. I've got about 20 of the things in my cupboard because she's told me I've got to do it. And they're the type of, you know, she didn't protest at school, that's the wrong word, but she basically put together a presentation. She educated. So she put together a presentation of what plastic does in the sea and how the plastic islands all come together. And she went and she educated, and she took the presentation to the head teacher and the staff room, basically, people in the staff. And then she said that what she wanted was a recycling bin in every classroom. And she wanted, like, basically little things up to remind people to recycle and put things that can be recycled. And then she got a statue of like a recycled statue saying, eat your 5 a day, recycle your 5 a day, at the front of her school. So when all the kids walk in, they see this statue and they're reminded to recycle. And she was very adamant. Now, she was very kind of like steadfast in what she wanted to happen. And she would roll on 10, 15 years, she'll be a protester. My great aunt Hilda was a Greenpeace activist, and she used to get on the boats when all the whaling, you know, and stop the whaling and stuff like that. And it's definitely that kind of generational continuation of protesting or acting change, which is so important for anything to actually happen.
Yeah.
On a long term basis.
One thing you were talking about that I just want to mention, because this really pisses me off, and it's something that all people who are opposed to, frankly, it sounds like any process that they don't agree with, is the you're all hypocrites argument.
Right.
So the you're all hypocrites argument is that because if you're protesting against climate change and you drive a car, or you use a plastic fork, or you go to Burger King, that somehow you're a hypocrite and therefore you don't deserve to protest, which is ludicrous, because you're basically saying that anyone who lives within a system which is basically built on those things doesn't have a right to protest, because unless you go and live in a field and only eat grass and hemp, you know, but it's a powerful argument because it's difficult to argue with, other than the fact that because you have to accept that people live within a system they can't get out of.
Well, yeah, and you know, if you go into any kind of place and it's like I'm gonna have a drink and they go to put a plastic straw in. I'm like, no, I'm okay. I don't want a plastic straw. That doesn't mean I'm not going to go and drink in that establishment because they serve plastic straws. It doesn't mean that I can't go and have feelings and like motivation.
But you wouldn't go. You believe in climate change, but you wouldn't go into a bar and go, okay, I want to see an itemised list of where you've got all your ingredients, because if they're not British, I'm not going to eat them because I believe in climate. You know, it's. And also, I think that we're not talking about sort of micro consumerist bollocks. Like, I have a reusable coffee cup, for example.
It's just an art of
makes
deflection.
Fuck all difference.
It's an art of deflection.
It's an art of deflection.
Stop making the coffee cups and force from up the top like the corporations, and then no one has a choice.
So then there's a question about. I mean, we're in a rabbit hole now, so we're just going to keep digging. Yeah. But then it's a blame game between three groups. It's the government, it's the corporations that manufacture the goods, and then it's the public. So the government say, well, the corporations that build these products that people buy, they need to take more responsibility, so we're going to regulate against that. Then the corporations are actually paying the government not to regulate. At the same time, you've got the corporations making products that are perhaps unsustainable, blaming the consumer for saying, well, we're making this product, but consumers don't have to buy it. They're buying it. And then you've got the consumers going, we want more sustainable products, but I basically need to drive to work, so I'm buying this Ford and I can afford a petrol one. Those who have expendable cash, frankly the very rich that are benefiting from the system we live in, can afford to be moral, and in the same way, people in Extinction Rebellion, maybe some people who support that can afford to be moral. I can afford to be moral, and I understand that people who live in Vietnam on less than $1 a day can't afford to determine whether or not they eat with a plastic fork or they eat with a wooden fork. So ultimately it has to be this kind of conflict between these three big groups in this process is going to have to become collaborative for there to be a real change.
But that's where protesting comes in, and that's where protesting has a key fundamental need within society. That you used the example there, but it could be anything. It could be to do with human rights. It could be to do with like back in the days when like the trade unions were kind of like in people's quality of work that were living. They were being asked to work in conditions in the Industrial Revolution where people were dying every day because the people that built the factories just didn't give a shit about people's welfare. And it's just like, well, hang on, no, that can't happen. And there was protesters there. In America, there was protesters, and they were literally in a position of putting the pressure on between the government to create legislation, between the corporations that were churning out, or they were working for the corporations more directly in those cases. But the protesting was inherently, needed in order to apply pressure for those legislations to change. Protesting is and should be a part of any society, and I think that.
So, what's your view on the ban and protesting in London for Extinction Rebellion?
Horrendous. Horrendous.
You can't do that.
You can't say to someone,
it should be alright.
You can't have freedom of speech.
Yeah. Oh,
what?
Everyone knows how me and Will feel about freedom of speech. So, and my argument back to the hypocrite argument, would be, I don't care who you are, you're a hypocrite in some way, shape, or form. Every individual. It's like the ignorance thing. When someone makes fun of you because you're ignorant about something.
All the time they do.
Yeah. Don't try and tell me you're not ignorant about something else. You're a hypocrite about something, and you're ignorant about something.
That's just because you're a human being.
Thank you. No one here is robots, so don't come at me with the hypocrite argument. That's what I would say personally.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I see it a lot on. The other thing I see a lot of people arguing about it is saying like, well, China's a bigger polluter, so why don't you go and protest in China?
Yeah.
Because you got to fly there.
Those are just trolls. they're just trolls.
Well, they are
trolls.
That's all.
Stupid troll.
Well, yeah, but I do think it's important in some way. I always try and engage those people because one, you can show how ignorant they are and how stupid they are in public, because that's basically and also I've found so far, if you have a kind of relatively light-hearted, direct conversation with them about what they're talking about, they kind of just descend into gibbering nonsense or stop talking. And actually, that's probably a win, because if you can convince one person who's potentially one way or the other that that it's
troll
to not troll, then that's a good thing.
So I've got like a dilemma question.
Okay.
Ghazi might have.
Ghazi said like nothing in this podcast.
I've said what I can.
You've been chatting away like a little baboon.
He drops questioning, and then everyone's like, "Whoa!"
So as you know, we always end.
We try
every guest episode with a dilemma question.
All right.
And Will says he's got a beautiful one.
Kind of.
Have you cleared this with him beforehand?
No, we don't.
We don't do it like that.
It's a surprise to me as well.
It was a surprise to me about an hour and 45 minutes ago, but we'll see how it goes.
Cool.
Anyway, so let's say, for example, you have there is a protest, okay, and we'll use Extinction Rebellion because it's been a theme throughout this podcast, right?
That wasn't my intention, by the way. We were meant to talk about more broad.
That's fine. It doesn't matter. We went with
I did all my research. All that research is wasted. Well,
the degree is.
We mentioned a few others. We mentioned Martin Luther King and Muhammad Ali. So.
And obviously my experience of Hong Kong and Chile and stuff. But, we'll just leave that for another time. Anyway, carry on.
So if you're in a protest and you're protesting again for this change to happen, and you have the option to violently bring down the establishment and create immediate change and rebuild, and society can rebuild.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a lot of turmoil. There's going to be a lot of it's going to be really difficult. It's going to be very, kind of like social constructs are going to be gone. They're going to have to be re-established, so forth. But violent protest, bang, down comes the establishment. Climate change processes can then be put in place, or whatever the things you wanted to be put in place. And then you can rebuild and restructure the social constructs in society as required, and that can be done in a year. Or would you rather go peaceful, knowing that it's going to take 10 years, but you could elicit the same change?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's an easy question in the sense that you, for reasons you've described, with relation to the hit rate or the success rate, I think.
No, you can be successful. Violent, it's going to be successful. Yeah. Be it turnaround.
I mean,
or
I can't
peaceful.
I can never see an argument for violent protest. Really.
Okay.
Really.
So 10 years, you're gonna wait.
You'll wait 10 years for change.
If change happens in 10 years, then yeah. So rather than what's the alternative is we basically storm the Houses of Parliament and hang Boris Johnson.
Bloody hell, mate! YouTube, we've lost all our YouTube. That's never going to happen, is it? No, I mean just a violent protest, which
no. I mean, I don't think there's any excuse for violence. I think violence is a weakness or it's a breakdown in resolve.
Okay.
Personally.
I like that. It's a breakdown in resolve.
Violence is a breakdown in resolve.
Yeah.
Okay. Ghazi, what would you do?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't go violent. I would wait the 10 years. Like, come on. If it's gonna be successful, then you gotta wait. You gotta be a bit patient. I know you wanted me to say be violent for that 1 year, but I couldn't do that.
I'd be curious to know, because I don't know the history of it, but I'd be curious to know whether there's been much non-violent protest in places like Palestine, which the saga has been going for as long as I've been alive.
Well, I mean, there's in Yemen there's peaceful protests, Tunisia, Egypt,
but there's still problems.
But there's still problems.
Well, there's always problems.
And there's still there's still obviously like this element of violence that sparks up every now and then that is, and I believe, an inevitable arm of any protesting movement is that element of violence. Whether it be civil rights, suffragettes. We didn't even mention the suffragettes and how they.
A brilliant contrast, right, or similarity, because you've got Emmeline Pankhurst running in front of the King's Horse at Ascot, I think, versus people sitting in the road at Trafalgar Square.
Yeah.
That was disruptive. Of course it was disruptive. She got killed by a horse in one of the biggest races in the UK at the time, and so how is that different to the disruption caused? Is it because it was a horse?
I don't know. It was a horse.
Was she sacrificed herself?
Yeah, people training themselves to fences and various other things that the suffragettes used to do. Of course, they were disruptive.
So the big thing was the starvation protests that they used to do.
Well, they have done, because I'm a member of the. I follow the newsletters and stuff, and they have asked for people to do hunger strikes and stuff.
Really?
Oh wow.
No one's started doing. Well, as far as I'm aware, no one's done it yet. But yeah, I guess all I would say to anyone listening who's kind of super anti one way is that it's never as black and white as you think.
I'd agree with that.
There's always greys and there's always a middle ground, and what you need to do is, if you disagree strongly, is to take a responsibility to find out as much as you can about the other perspective. And if after all that research and that connection, understanding, you still think that way, then good on you. But the problem we have at the moment is people read headlines and then go, I disagree with this, I agree with that, and then they get fed it over and over again, day by day.
And the trouble is that people respond very emotionally.
Yeah.
And they have emotional triggers, and the emotional trigger creates a response. It's a hardwired response, and you completely bypass a part of the brain.
Yeah.
Which makes you think rationally, creatively, adaptively. All those things, the prefrontal part of the brain, you never even engage in because you just had an emotional trigger response through reading a particular headline or being given a piece of disseminated information which is kind of true, a little bit of truth, but quite a bit of sensationalisation as well. And you just end up with this situation where it's just like loads of people just making really rash, emotional decisions around things. It's like, no.
Yeah. So I'll tell my story, and then I'm gonna stop speaking because I'm tired and I've got to go to a gig. But yeah, there's this.
Is it a protesting gig?
Yeah, it's related. So basically, I used to be the guy that would just post stuff on social media that I saw. I read the headlines, wouldn't really read into it. I look in the backstory of it.
Okay.
And I got those guys.
Yeah. I got into a debate with a guy called Royston who I was friends with on Facebook, and he challenged me on this chat I was going through, and basically said, look, all I can see you doing at the moment is posting all this stuff, you should have a look at all this. So I reached out to him separately, and I sort of chatted to him about it, and he sent me a few kind of like conversational YouTube channels and things, so I could kind of understand different perspectives, particularly from the right wing side, because I've been, I guess, a liberal lefty for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
Because I grew up on a farm, whatever. Yeah. But actually seeing the argument, it's not just the argument, it's an argument well articulated, because there's so many people who have opinions and views which don't articulate their opinion, and they just shout at you across the room. Mm-hmm. But actually listening to somebody who is right wing or otherwise with an articulate way of describing why they believe what they believe, it can be quite a challenging idea, even if you disagree with what they say. But anyway, about 2 weeks after I had this conversation and reached out to him, we had a bit of a back and forth, and he showed me these things. He actually died. He passed away in Africa, as he went over there to kind of to help out and for charity or build a school. I don't know what he was doing.
That's terrible. It
is terrible. And I never got, one of my regrets in my kind of early adult life is never had the real opportunity to really engage with him in a conversation in person, to really understand and grow myself and my understanding. But I would say whenever I'm thinking about, or whenever I see stuff that I strongly disagree with now, I always have in the back of my mind his voice saying, read into it. What are you investigating here? Do you believe it? Do you not? Are you connected to it? Do you know what's involved? So yeah, I would say that that's really stuck with me as an experience that's driving my curiosity around different views. Yeah, after 2 weeks, frankly, of even really knowing who he was. Yeah. So that was quite powerful.
I think that's a very and thanks for sharing that. I think that's definitely a powerful experience that you can, for those listening as well, and if you're in a situation, you see something, think Royston.
Yeah.
Dig into it. Don't just take it. Do a Royston. And dig into it and actually have a bit of a think about what you're reading, and kind of don't accept it at face value.
That's right.
Sound advice.
It's dedicated to him.
Sound advice.
Podcast.
Amazing.
You want to add anything else, Ghazi?
I'm just going to add at the end, I do think peaceful protests are the way. I do think there's some scenarios where it won't work, but we'll leave that. I don't know, slavery, for example. I mean, you can't really.
No.
It wouldn't work. But for climate change, please be as peaceful as you can. Get the people on your side, please. And we can leave it at that, unless you've got anything else to say, Will.
Charlie, any final words? Thank you for coming on. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast. And we may get you back on.
Hopefully it wasn't too dull for people.
No.
No, you're not that dull, mate.
Yeah, well...
this video, where can we find it? The one you said you recorded. Is it on YouTube?
Yeah, man. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, send it in the description.
Yeah, you can stick it in there.
I'd like to have a look as well.
The thingy.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for listening, guys. It's always a pleasure. And until next time, you've been listening to The Big Drill.
Yeah, season 2 will be beginning soon. Thank you all, guys.
Hi, I'm Will.
And I'm Ghazi.
And thanks for tuning in to The Big Drill. You can also find us on these platforms here. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can find him on Insta.
Ghazi.92.
And me, Will Hawkins Coaching. The links are in the description. And until the next time we drill deep, goodbye.
Bye.